Hey guys, Anthony Jones with Brigade Boats, and this is Chapter 7 of the Top Gun Porta Jon build. Today's video, I'm going to show you how I framed the aluminum floor system in this 12-foot Jon boat. Stick around, I'm going to show you step by step how I did it.
And what I envision doing here is creating a floor system for the cockpit that is very similar to the Top Gun Jon boat in size and design. The only difference, it's going to be aluminum. And this thing is super flexible, super sketchy. As you can see, everything shifts and moves and wobbles, and I'm going to reinforce it. And what I'm going to reinforce it with is this material here. And essentially what I'm going to do is notch this and run it this way and do basically do a subfloor out of this, tie it into the ribs, and then sheet aluminum and actually foam underneath it as a floating system. Again, similar to what I did in that boat. Now, before I cut these and tie these in, I've had to do a lot of measuring. Of course, I've got all the aluminum hatches for this boat, and I've already done layout in this boat of exactly where everything needs to go. So, long story short, a hatch will go to right about here where I have this marked, and the front deck will come out to right about in here where I have this marked. All right, so when I do this bracing on the floor system, I'm only going to run to just past where I need to tie in my deck down so it can tie into this material. So there's going to be some math and some thinking ahead involved. This boat has yet to get bottom coat. I'm going to run Fastco Super Slick bottom coat on this thing, which is a 2-part epoxy, and it's going to seal around all them rivets, and it flexes, which is going to be perfect for this. But before I do that, I figured I would start the floor system because I'm going to be beating on this floor, and I'm going to torque out some of these ribs when I cut these benches out. So I've regressed, and I'm decided to cut the benches, get the floor system framed out, and then revert back to flipping the boat over and doing the bottom coat. And then from there, it will be golden. Got everything kind of laid out as to where I'm going to be cutting. As you can see, I'm going to come across the bottom, up and around. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to leave this section back here for a rear hatch. And then we're going to have a hatch here, and the floor system will start. Not to bore you guys with the bench thing. I know you're here for the floor system, but again, I need to cut these out because that's going to play a role into what's going to go on here. What I've done back here is I've made 2 marks. Mark number 1 is 36 inches from the back of my framing. That's where I want my deck to end and go to the cockpit. This mark, 1.5 inches in. And what this second mark represents is where the framing is going to go. As you can see, I marked it this way because what I'm about to do is I'm going to take this back mark and I'm going to level down and I'm going to make some marks on the floor. That's going to represent where my reinforced floor system is going to go. I want it to run wild 1.5 inches so I could tie it back together with an aluminum angle. And then my tubing for my uprights for my back deck has something to sit on. You'll see what I mean as we move forward. I repeated the same process on the front deck, made my marks on the back side of the framing, 1.5 inches in, leveled down, made a mark. So now I've got a mark here, got a mark there. Now I know the length of the aluminum I need to cut. This is the material that I'm using for my floor system. This is from Nate's, and Nate's Custom Boats and Accessories. He uses this on the underside of his hatch lids for structural reinforcement. He'll weld this on the underside of the lids, so on the bigger lids, so they don't flex when you stand on them. I'm going to use it for my floor system, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that right there, and we're going to notch, and we're going to notch, and we're going to drop it down over these ribs, and we're going to tie it together with rivets, run it long, come back across with angled aluminum, come back across with angled aluminum, tie it all together. And then basically with that angled aluminum and all tied in as one, tied in with the original ribs, this should stiffen things up. And then that'll give me a good structure to bring my deck out and go down and tie into. So everything will be tied together throughout the boat. That's kind of my plan. And then we'll come back in between everything and do some foam and then bring that up as a floating deal. And then we'll sheet it in aluminum. That's the game plan. Let's see how it comes together. I got my measurement and it is time to cut the aluminum. I'm using the Ryobi with the DeWalt blade. It's a 10-inch 40 tooth, guys. Now I've marked out where my notches need to be to overlap this rib. I'm going to notch it to this part, leave the flat so I can tie it down. Got it all notched out, and the notches on the outside are going to be bigger than the notches on the inside. And this is just because of how my boat is. And what had happened was I cut small notches and I went to put them in, and I realized this whole edge is smashed in. I don't know if you could see that. It's super low, and so this is higher. And whenever I cut that notch, things weren't planing out, so I really needed to drop that down. So that's what I did on the outsides because it mirrored each other. Now everything planes really nicely. So it is a floating floor, and this is rigid, guys. We're not relying on this for strength. And because this overlaps here, there is a slight air void underneath it. Not worried about it, because when this is all tied together and this is tied in with the framing and this is cross braced, it's all going to be solid. Now that I've got these 4 parts in place and I've got them how I want them sitting, I'm looking ahead at how I'm going to do the final attachment into the boat and how my framing is going to tie together. And looking ahead at the framing, let me show you what I noticed, guys. As you can see, there's a big gap. Now I've shimmed that one, but let me show you what I'm seeing here. Tight, tight, big gap, and then that's with shims. Reason being, this section of the floor in the center is caved in. It's a real old boat, guys. This is super thin material, just years of abuse. There's no getting that back to where it needs to be, and it won't stay that way long term. So I'm going to bring the framing down to it. As opposed to trying to jack this up, I'm just going to shim it, and that'll be my easiest solution. Now for these shims, all I did was take some 1.5 inch flat aluminum and cut them. 3 work there, 3 is going to work there. I'm going to have the same issue in the back. I don't know how many y'all need, but it'll be a similar deal. What I think I'm going to do is take the shims and install them to these pieces out of the boat, and then get everything shimmed properly and get all the pieces back in, and then install these to the ribs, and then come back in and install my framing over everything, tying it together permanently. And now you can see it planes out properly. Just going to repeat the process on this back side, and then we'll get this stuff tied together. Okay, I think I'm to the point where I want to go ahead and attach these to the ribs. But before I do, let me show you guys what tools I'm using. As you probably saw when I attached these shims, I'm using a 2 drill setup. On drill number 1, I'm using a 3/16 bit by Milwaukee. It's a very nice bit here, guys. Definitely recommend that. Number 2, just got a countersink drill bit, and that's what allows that hole to get bored out so that rivet can sit nice and flush. The rivets I'm using are 3/16 rivets purchased by tinyboatnation.net. I'll leave the link down in the description where you get these rivets from. Countersink 3/16, grip range of 1/4 to 3/8. And I'm using a hand rivet gun, guys. I know that's prehistoric. I actually ordered the Milwaukee, so I'm super excited about that. If you've looked at the Milwaukees, they're the best rivet gun on the market, but they're like $300. So, you know, take it or leave it. I've got some customer projects coming in, so I'm definitely going to need it. That may be here before this is done, but if not, we're going old school with this thing. All the parts are installed with rivets. Was able to hit 2 rivets on the inner pieces, tying into the ribs, and then on the outside, the rib actually ends right about here. So just tied it in with 1 rivet, the sheet aluminum, and then the angle will tie everything back together. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. So on to measuring the angle, cutting the angled, and installing. Mail call, this came in, ordered it at Home Depot about a week ago. Got the Milwaukee M12 rivet tool, spent a little bit more money and got the rotary tool. They had like a combo package, so I figured that it was worth it. But super excited about this. I put off buying it for a while, guys, because of the price tag, but I know a lot of guys that use these and have had success. And I swore I was gonna do this boat with hand rivets, but I've got a couple customer boat projects with Brigade Boats that already have deposits. I'm going to be taking them boats in the near future, and I'm going to need this anyhow. So I went ahead and made the purchase to save me some time on the front end of this build. Super excited. So from now on, you're going to see me use this bad boy. Got my side-to-side framing, tying everything together. Of course, the shims are underneath to ensure that my framing planes out. Now, my floor is going to have a slight dip in the center. Not necessarily worried about that, guys. I'm just going what's there, and I'm trying to make something true that my framing can tie into, as opposed to trying to frame down to an inconsistent variable in the floor system. I don't know if that makes sense, but regardless. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to attach my side-to-side on my rails on the front and on the back, and then I'm going to do my verticals and tie everything together and force this framing down. It's lifted a little bit here. And so, because obviously these end pieces have nothing to tie into. So when I go side to side, then I can run my tubes, and I'm going to cut them, I'm going to shove this down and cut them tight. And then it's going to force everything down. It's going to be super tight. And then I could come back, do my foam, and then do my sheeting. Got this piece cut that's going to go side to side here. And I wanted to show you, I cut the ends on a 15 degree, and it's going to go up and under these side rails. Let me explain. I'm to the point where I need to make a decision on my framing package for this entire boat. Basically, if I go underneath on my framing, then what I need to do is everywhere there's a side-to-side connection throughout the entire boat, anywhere there's going to be a hatch going and side-to-side connection, I'm going to need to go under. What happens is sometimes people go under here, over here, under, and then when they get on the inside, they overlap, and then all of a sudden your front casting deck is doing the Humpty Dumpty when you do your sheet aluminum, because you've got so many laps, and every time you do it, that's 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do on mine is from side to side points, I'm going to go under, and then from front to back, I'm going to go over, which should plane out with my side rails. And then anywhere when I do my sheeting from side to side, if I need to do a shim or something to bump that sheet aluminum up flush, so everything planes perfect, and then I will. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, I'm going to be consistent with my framing. Side to side, underlapping, front to back, overlapping. And I know that doesn't really have anything to do with the floor system in particular, but because I need to tie this together side to side to tie it into my floor, the decision now has to be made. So I figure I'd cover it because I think it would benefit you guys. Now that I have these in, I'm going to go ahead and cut my uprights and install them. I'm using a speed square to ensure that my uprights go in perfectly square, top to bottom. I've got the 4 uprights in place for the front deck, 1.5 by 1.5 16th aluminum. And I've got the hatch for the front deck in just for some logistical reasons. Guys, I'm not putting these in any rhyme or reason. I kind of matched these up opposite and then did these. It doesn't necessarily matter. The one thing I am doing is I'm putting them directly above that hat channel for my floor system, kind of like how you would frame a roof system on a house. You would put your rafters directly above your studs. Obviously, if you put this in the middle, this is going to flex. This is a solid base. So that's kind of how I'm doing that. Now I'm going to repeat the process on the back. Now that I got all that done, there's just a couple final things to do before I do the foam and then sheet it in aluminum and finish this project with the floor system. I've got to create some flanges to tie into. Eventually what's going to happen on these sides is there's going to be a panel that's spaced about 1 inch off of the hole. It's going to give me a nice spot to route wires on both sides and feed things through. And then I could eventually C-deck these side panels and it'll look pretty. Nonetheless, I got to figure out a way for these panels to actually mount. So I'm going to take some angled aluminum and attach it down here in a couple spots as a flange so I can install that later. I want to do that first because I want to run my sheet aluminum floor system to those pieces of aluminum that side panel is going to attach to. So I'm going to get started on that. Okay, so that's what I came up with. I honestly wanted to turn it in to have it like that, but I couldn't get my rivet gun back behind it when I folded it over. So we're going to run it like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 of these, and then in between I'm going to shim so everything is planing, and then my sheet aluminum will come in and overlap all that. Be a little bit higher on the edges, but I mean, come on guys, this is a 16th, nothing you'll ever see. So I'm going to go ahead and mount these. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the details because it really doesn't have much to do with the floor system besides the fact that I had to put these in place before I do my aluminum floor. So I'll give you the overall concept: angled aluminum, bent them on an angle, attached to the upper rail, attached to the bottom hat channel, made sure everything planes out. And this is just going to be how my side panels mount into the boat. And so now that that's done, I'm just going to replicate that on that side. And then what I came back and did was do some flat in between. That way all this is going to plane out when I do my sheet aluminum. Again, I know it doesn't have to do much with the floor, but this is necessary to think ahead and do this before I do the floor so I don't get myself in a pickle later down the road, cousins. All right, I've got this side all done, mimicking the side I already showed you. Got a piece of sheet here. Let me kind of show you how this works. And all that's going to do is attach to the top and bottom flanges. Obviously, this isn't cut to fit, but you kind of get the idea, get the concept, and that'll come at a later date. Now it's time to do the foam. So this is the foam board I'm going to be using on the floor. It's Polypro insulation foam board. I believe this is 1/2 inch. I'm going to double it up to create 1 inch. It provides some insulation, obviously, and also sound barrier. So that's good for your floor system. You're going to be dropping stuff in here, beating things around, walking in it. So that helps out. The main reason why I am using it is because, you know, instead of having hollow voids in here and having your sheet aluminum and having spots that could actually flex, because I'm going to go with a thinner gauge aluminum in this floor system to try to save some weight. This acts as kind of a filler in here to give you a solider surface to walk on, if that makes any sense. And, you know, I'm not a big pour foam guy. For floor systems, I believe pour foam has its place, and in my floor system in this boat is not its place. So we're going to go with this, and what I'm going to do is just cut to fit. I'm not going to get super tight, guys, because I want my subfloor to be able to breathe. I want water to be able to freely go in and out of this boat if it rains or, you know, whatever. And that's part of having the drains and the hatches and directing water to channels and getting it to the back of the boat and out. So I don't want to fill all this in with pour foam, and I also don't want to fill it all in with this foam board. So I'm gonna, give myself some breathing room and allow for some gaps and allow for this to kind of ventilate if water does need to, do its thing. Started the foam, and let me show you exactly what I'm doing. I'm cutting these pieces so they just fit in here. They butt. All right, just fits. And then that one's already glued in. I just put this in here for a demonstration. The top piece will be bigger. So the small piece goes on the bottom, just fits inside. On the top, I cut it a little bit wider to cover up this and cover up this. And then that just goes in like so. And then it'll be nice and tight. All right. And I'm just measuring. I'm going to do all the bottoms first, and then I'm going to do all the tops. I'm using Gorilla Construction adhesive, and I'll show you in a second how I'm actually gluing it. But I'm just taking my foam, making my measurement, and I'm cutting it out. And that's pretty much it. When I make my cuts, I'll show you here in a second what happens and how I clean up by using a vacuum. Very simple, taking the Gorilla Construction adhesive, and I'm just putting some on the corners and a little bit in the middle. Remember, that's going to be hollow under there, so I'm just doing a little bit on the sides, guys, and that's it. And then what I will do is take this, slide it into place, and then that just glues down. This stuff grabs pretty good, and that's it. Just gluing it down so it'll sit flush with the floor and tight. And then I'll glue the second layer to the first layer. And then that'll be it. That'll be the foam insulation that goes down underneath the sheet metal. I'm going to go ahead and do all this. Foam is all in, everything's glued up and cured, and now I'm just going to cut the sheet aluminum. I'm just going to use a circular saw with an old wood blade. No big deal, it'll cut through that aluminum really good, but I do want to use an old blade because I don't want to burn up my good blade. I just measured everything out for the floor size, and I'm using 0.060 for the floor. Try to shed a little bit of weight there with that thinner aluminum. And since everything is going to be super solid underneath it, I'm not concerned about it. But I am really excited because my measurement was like dead square. I'm 38 3/8 length and 30 3/4 width. I mean, all the way, it's a perfect square. So I for sure thought something would be off here or there, maybe even 1/4 of an inch, because it is what it is. But I ended up with a square, so we're going to go ahead and cut it.